A lot of you are starting to think in this direction anyway, so now that you're kind of getting big ideas that are out there, you might be saying, all right, how does that actually work then on day-to-day pieces? What does it look like on day-to-day pieces? And it's really interesting. A couple of years ago, I got to hang out in a career tech ed center, and I learned a lot from spending the day there because, you know, I walked in to watching the students in the welding class. And they said to me pretty early on into my experience in there, hey, Dana, do you want to try to weld? And I said, excuse me, do I want to try to weld? I don't know how to weld. Well, we'll fit you up with the gear and one of the kids will show you how to do it. And I said, but don't I need to have some basic lessons in how to weld? I said, do you actually give, you know, one of these instruments to your students in the 9th grade and say, have at it, kids? And they're like, no, we don't do that. And I said, well, I need some scaffolding here. Long story short, they did let me weld. It was kind of scary for me, but I can knock that one off my bucket list. But it really laid the foundation for me to think about getting students to start with that driving question, to get them to the end point. What comes in the middle? Because one of the biggest things that I think I missed the boat on early on was just saying, okay, here's your question, now have at it for the kids. And I didn't do enough of the scaffolding for them and the facilitating that process. And so sometimes that end product that I had wasn't exactly the end in mind that I had going into it because I wasn't doing enough of that support for them. So the scaffolding piece is what's really going to come into play. That's what does it look like on a daily basis. So we start with this whole project, right? We introduce this project to them, however it is that we want to introduce it to them. You know, are we going to take them on that walking field trip? Are we going to show them some video clip? Are we going to read them some sort of a dramatic reading to engage them in this process? And then from that driving question, they're going to have all sorts of questions that they need to answer. But what do those pieces look like? What do they look like? And you're going to be able to include all of these types of things into that day-to-day piece. So maybe I need to do a direct instruction lesson on how to turn the welder on, right? I don't have any idea if I'm using the appropriate terminology for that. But do I have to do some direct instruction on that? Are there pieces that I have to spend, 20 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever it is, literally lecturing my students on these components because it's a foundational piece that they need? Does that mean I need to lecture every day on it? No, because then what happens is I'm giving them all of the information and I'm not allowing them to uncover some of that information. But are there certain activities that we could do to help support this? Can we do simulations? Can we do debates with our students? All of these components that would feed into allowing them to be able to answer that overarching driving question.
The simulations were on that fake list before.
So you can do a simulation as a scaffold to help them in the greater context of the project, but if you just do a simulation, it's just a simulation and it's not a project.
Okay.
But I could simulate something to help them to understand.
Like the mountains could be boxes on top of a table in their way as they're trying to go out west, and the rivers could be a piece of carpet. Is that what you're talking about?
Sure, and they could navigate their way through that.
Okay.
Sure, that would be a simulated experience for them to be able to kind of understand some of those components that you're trying to drive home in the project itself. Observation, inference, I show them something or I have them read maybe a speech and they're trying to make inferences out of it, or I give them an object and they're trying to infer what it is. They could do that. We could do that analysis of any kind of primary source documents. Again, that hits heavy on your Common Core standards. They could be doing map work. They could be doing case studies. I was mentioning earlier, I think you actually had walked out of the room, but we were talking about your extinction project. And so Sheila and I were talking, and I said, so maybe with the extinction piece, they look at a case study of an animal that was on the brink of extinction, and how were they able to bring it off of the list, off of the endangered list. And that could be a case study that would help them to further their understanding so that they could take a particular animal that's on the list and come up with a plan to get them off. So those would be scaffolding pieces that we could do for our students. So I want to show you a teacher in action who is doing some scaffolding with her students in a math class. And she's going to go through several levels of scaffolding on how to get students to better understand these concepts. She's not going to talk about a specific project, but I just wanted you to see the scaffolding approaches that she uses. That's the teaching channel. I don't know if any of you subscribe to the teaching channel, but the teaching channel, that particular one is on YouTube, but it's free to sign up for the teaching channel. They have all kinds of videos with all kinds of content areas that you can watch the videos and you can download the materials that go with them. So that particular lesson had 3 specific components within it where they continued to level up with the students. So starting at a more basic level and moving up and assessing along the way to ensure that the students knew it. So that's a really great example of scaffolding that you would have to do in the context of a project. So these are just some different ideas that I compiled for you to think about for students to do as different tasks and or activities that you might have them do during the project process to ensure that all of the students are on the right track. Maybe if you need to differentiate for some of your students in the process, maybe you've done some direct instruction with the whole group, but then you find 3 or 4 students need some additional help and maybe you need to do something additional with them. So maybe we did some case studies already, but some of your students need additional case studies. Where some of our students need to work on sequencing paragraphs because they're having trouble with that component of it, and you can do additional work with them. So those are just some different ideas that are out there. Now, as you start to think about the project itself, the easiest way for me to create some of my scaffolding activities is to actually look at Bloom's taxonomy. This is, of course, the revised Bloom's, the newest levels of Bloom's. The old one, remember, it ended at evaluation, so the new Bloom's level ends at creation. And that creation level, at the top level, that's really where you want your driving question to be. So if you look at your driving question and you say, oh, wait, I think it's just down here at applying, you need to go back and you need to revise it to get it to be at that creation level. This happens to be an example that one of the teachers at my building did. He did in 9th grade geometry. He had them look at designing, it wasn't for the community, but it was actually for the school, because then the community was going to come in and use it because the school board would not agree to building the pool unless the community could come in and use it. And so they designed the pool for the school. They designed the seating areas, the locker rooms, all of that good stuff. As part of their 9th grade geometry project, they did all the bidding on it. But if we take them through each of these levels, at the remembering level, this is the kind of stuff that they should really have as kind of a pre-knowledge base. And then at that understanding, can we take that remembering level and can we go up a level? And now that we know our area of a rectangle, can we compare different areas? And so all I did was just pull from the internet some of those verbs that we use in the different levels. And I know Sheila and I were talking just a little bit ago about how oftentimes many of our questions just end up in these first 2 levels or maybe gets into that 3rd level, but we want to start pushing our students into these levels over here, but we have to scaffold that. So we start at this point, and maybe some of our students stay at this point a lot longer than some of our other students because they need more support They have an IEP, they have a 504 plan, so we need to do some differentiation. Maybe some of our students are going to more quickly get into that analyzing and that evaluation piece, but ultimately we want to get all of our students to that creation level. The question is, how do we get them there? How do we scaffold for them to get them there? So some students may need additional scaffolding. So I might run small group instruction with a small group of students multiple times during the week if they need additional support. My other students might be working on the project because they don't need that additional support and they're doing whatever they need to do to get more toward that creation level. So if I go back to that Bloom's taxonomy, and I'll just flip back for one, if I can create each level of questions for my project, that should help me to plan out what my scaffolding activities are. So what am I going to do as an activity or as a lesson to get them to be able to answer this analyzing question? What am I going to do as a lesson or an activity to get them to be able to answer this application question? So if I can design all of these questions and all of these levels, that will help me to plan out my lessons. That's where it gets down to the daily stuff, the nitty-gritty stuff. And so I thought it would be useful to give you some strategies on how to get them to those higher levels and some different activities that you can do to help with the critical thinking, because critical thinking are really those higher orders of thinking, those higher levels, and not just at our bottom two. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a couple of different project ideas, and I'm going to run you through some activities that would help you to, and you could use these in any kind of a project, to help you to get them to these higher levels of thinking. So if we were going to do a project around graffiti, maybe our project was how could we decrease the amount of graffiti in our community? Maybe that's our project that we're going to do. I could do something to get them at this application level that's called personification. And some of you may have tried personification in your own classrooms, or maybe you've done it in a class and experienced in it. What you do is you take the problem, so we have this problem of graffiti, right? And now we make it into a person. We personalize it. And we say, if graffiti could talk, what might it say? So what might it say?
We're the best.
Okay. They might, yeah.
I mean, the gang is going to say
Right.
their own words.
Yeah. I mean, that might be what it's trying to say. What else might it say?
Look at me.
Look at me. Want some attention, look over here. What else might it say?
Express yourself.
Okay. I'm expressing myself. If it could think, what might it realize?
I'm art.
Okay. On the one hand, I'm art, right? And a lot of times it takes teachers a while to get to that point. They only look at the negative piece instead of the really positive piece. And if you look at a lot of cities in Europe, they've taken the graffiti and they've turned it into public art and public art sites where it's celebrated. What else might it think?
People don't want me here.
People don't want me here. If it's not a building that the artist owns, right? If it could hear, what might it have known? Pardon?
I'm thinking about what people say about it when they see it. That's not what you're saying.
Well, if people are saying something, do they not hear that?
Oh.
Yeah.
It would have known it wasn't liked, it wasn't appreciated.
Okay. In some instances, it's not appreciated.
They would have known somebody put some time and effort into it.
Yourself.
If it's the artist, itself.
Somebody did it at night when nobody else was around.
And so we could take this in a lot of different directions, right? If this was the particular project, if we want to decrease the amount of graffiti. Because are we going to go in the direction of Do we create now public art and put more of a positive spin on it so that they're not trying to do it in the dead of night and to do it on buildings where it shouldn't be or on public property? Can we look at it from the perspective of New York City, who had such an issue with graffiti that it really was the increase in crime that New York City saw? And if any of you have read Malcolm Gladwell's The Tipping Point, and they talk about what that tipping point was to decrease crime, and it was the point at which they could immediately eliminate the graffiti on the subway trains as it was put on. Because the graffiti on the subway trains really opened the doors for people to say, well, the city doesn't care, so I don't have to pay for the subway, so I can jump the turnstile, so I don't have to pay for it. And it really led to an increase in crime. And so that tipping point was to get rid of the graffiti. So there are a lot of different directions that you could go with this particular project or this project idea. You could do it in a lot of different disciplines, but by personifying it, to have students to start to see this as not necessarily just negative, but what are the positives that we can pull out of this as well? If we look at illiteracy, and if we were trying to do a project around illiteracy and decreasing the amount of illiteracy in our community, or increasing the literacy rate, we could do something called a force field analysis, and so therefore it is definitely an analysis level. And in a force field analysis, now we're looking at driving and restraining forces. So if we know that our current state of illiteracy in this nation is approximately at 20%, we want to get to that ideal state of 100% literacy rate. The driving forces would be what the students would have to list that would help us to get to that ideal state. So what are the things that are going to push us toward that ideal state? So if we have mentors and volunteer programs, is that going to help us to get to our ideal state? If we can have businesses in our community that are involved, is that going to help us to push us to our ideal state? The restraining forces, that's what's keeping us from getting at our ideal state. That's where we are at our current state. So we know that immigration is certainly an issue because you have people that are immigrating here that they don't speak the language, right? Many of them may speak their own language, but could even be illiterate in their native language. Oftentimes, you have school dropout rates, low socioeconomic status, difficulty of the English language. All of these are restraining forces that help us, or hinder us rather, from getting to that ideal state. So if the students look at the driving forces and the restraining forces, then they have to review each of these to figure out what course of action that they want to take. Because we know that they can't target each of these things. They're going to have to focus on one, and out of whatever it is that they focus on, they're going to have to come up with some sort of a justification for why they want to actually implement one of those pieces.
I'm
Go ahead.
sorry.
Nope.
So that's basically a T-chart the kids have made in order to determine which action to focus on.
Yes, so it's a fancy T-chart. It's definitely a little bit more fancy because we're looking at pushing and
Sure.
pulling pieces, and it's an analysis of that fact. So this is an activity that you could do at that level of blooms to get them, to help them to get to that creation level.
And then after that, which one are we going to focus
Which one are we focusing on and why? Because oftentimes the kids will just say, oh, all right, this is what I want to do. Well, why is that what you want to do? Well, what are the other things that we could possibly do besides this? All right, if we look at alternative forms of energy, that might be a particular project that we want to undertake, and maybe we're looking at, how could we increase the usage of alternative energy forms? That might be the driving question. For this, we could do something at the evaluation level, and this is called the 6 thinking hats. Have you ever heard of the 6 thinking hats? Yeah. Okay, there are a couple of different ways that you can do the 6 thinking hats. The 6 thinking hats originally was created to be done in this way, that all of us at once will only take on one hat at a time. So we'll have a discussion and we'll all take on the white hat, and we're only going to talk about the information and only the information. All of us now are going to take on the yellow hat, and we're all going to have a discussion and do it optimistically. We are going to play the devil's advocate now and look at just the judgments that we have about what is happening here. And you can have a discussion that way. That's the way the 6 thinking hats was intended to be run. I've also done a variation on that where I've put students in groups of 6, again, focusing on communication here, and I have them each take on a different hat. And so maybe my student who is my very pessimistic student, I might assign them the yellow hat to wear. Now you have to be optimistic about this. Or the person who is maybe not the one who really is a leader in the group, maybe I make them wear the blue hat, so now they have to take charge of the conversation and make sure that everybody is following the process, and you're wearing your yellow hat, you're wearing your red hat. And so you can do it in either of those ways. So what if we go back to the previous one that we looked at with our force field analysis, maybe we pick one of those particular options, and now we go into the 6 thinking hats. So before we were at analysis, and now we're going to level up and go to evaluation with this particular activity, because now we have to really tear apart whatever option it is that we chose from each of these perspectives. So if at the end of the day, with our public audience, we're going to put forward this particular proposal on how to, use more alternative energy forms, or maybe it's a particular form of alternative energy, we need to make sure that our public audience is going to come back and say, well, you didn't think about this, you didn't think about this, you didn't think about that. And if we go through these 6 thinking hats, we've already evaluated those pieces. And again, it levels up for our students. Any questions on those? So even if you say, Dana, this project-based learning thing, I'm just too overwhelmed, but I really want to try the 6 thinking hats in class tomorrow. It's a strategy that you could use. Because as we're scaffolding each of these pieces, we not only want to scaffold, but as we're scaffolding, we want to do assessment during the process. So we want to talk a little bit about formative assessment here. This picture, this comes to us from Spanish House down in Dallas, Texas. It is an elementary school, starts at pre-K, and it is a Spanish immersion school. They start out, they do a 90, 80, 70, I believe it is, in terms of immersion. And then they loop students back through again. So these pre-K and kindergarten kids, their 90% of their day is fully in Spanish. It's pretty amazing, and they do their projects in Spanish. And it's really cute, because I have a good friend who runs the school, and her one daughter is 3. She's in the preschool program, and sometimes she will stomp her foot and say, I don't know the word in English. She only knows it in Spanish, right? So these students, not only are they learning a new language, but they're all up at this creativity level when they're doing their projects. And this particular project that they did was a Rube Goldberg machine. And they partnered with engineering students from SMU, Southern Methodist University, down in Dallas, to do this particular project. So kindergarten students that did this project. And this is a kindergarten Rube Goldberg machine. This was one of their final products that they did. So pretty impressive for a 5-year-old. And we know that for this 5-year-old to get to this particular point, they didn't start there, but there had to be a lot of scaffolding along the way. But there also had to be a lot of assessment along the way. And for me personally, in reflection, first and foremost, I will admit I did not know what formative versus summative assessment was for a really long time. Had no clue. Remember that meeting where my assistant superintendent was talking about the two, And I couldn't wait until we had a break so that I could Google it without anybody seeing me. And in reality, it's because I wasn't doing enough of formative assessment. So formative assessment, to me, is much more important than your summative assessment, because if you are doing enough of formative assessment, you should be able to predict what your end summative assessment is going to look like from each student. Because if I'm doing enough of formative assessment, then I can do the differentiation. I can scaffold properly for each of my students wherever they are in that process. Because it's all about the process and not just about the product. Because that summative piece, that's the end piece. So let's talk about formative assessment. What are some formative assessments that you do?
I just gave one today, a quiz.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a free test.
You can do a quick quiz.
Ticket out the door.
Might be discussion.
Ticket out. Could be a discussion.
KWL at the beginning of a lesson.
And putting their initials next to their comments helps you keep track.
Big note,
Comments.
What is
class note.
Could be a review of class notes.
I had them write in their journals
Journals are one of my favorites.
to a question I ask. Yeah. But I can't say I get great answers.
That's okay. Because whatever those answers are, it should help you to scaffold for your next lessons.
Could be a warmer also.
Mm-hmm.
Could be a quick write, but that goes on with journals.
You know what? I'm gonna take them as two different things, really. Because that quick write, I mean, it is. It could be a 3-minute thing. Here's a topic I want you to very quickly write on this. The journal might be much more focused. And what I will do with my journals is I will have them journal daily on the driving question, so that I can again see that process and I can see the growth of that process. And they'll say to me the first time around, Mrs. Lauer, we just answered this question yesterday. Well, if you answered it totally and fully, then I didn't do a very good job creating the question, right? So as I'm reading those journals, then it's going to help me to target any student that needs help because they have a misconception or they're not completely understanding something. That quick write is going to be a little bit different. So I would definitely do this as two different formative assessments.
Direct questioning of process.
And the definitions of vocabulary words.
Yeah, you know, if I'm hearing my students use vocabulary words in their conversation, I know in my formative assessment that they're really getting things, right?
A justified, true, false.
So what, they say whether it's true or false and they explain?
And the justified. Like if it's true, I don't make them justify, but if they feel it's false, they have to justify why the statement is false.
So I'm going to talk just a minute about this discussion. I just yesterday, on the plane, wrote a blog on a type of discussion that you can do. It's called Harkness protocol. And it's my version of the Harkness. I call it more of a spider web. And again, you can feel free to read the entire blog. But basically what I do, and you can do this, I've done it with 5-year-olds. I've done it with 5-year-olds with as many as 6 in a group of 5-year-olds. I've done it with adults with as many as 40 in a group. At 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, I was doing 30 because I had 30 in a class. I've done it in the 7th grade classroom. I would not recommend that you do more than about 15 in a group of 7th graders. And at about the 4th, 5th grade level, you can do about 10 to 12. So you might have to run multiple discussion groups, maybe have some kids doing learning station or something like that while you do a discussion. But you give them an open-ended question, prompt, and all you do is you're going to chart their discussion. So I would draw a circle. I would have a big circle on my chart paper, and I would have dots around the circle where I would write names of the students on the dots. And so when I give them the prompt, I do nothing else but chart the discussion. I don't jump into the discussion, but whomever starts to the second person to the third person, right? And all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna chart the entire thing. And I might go back and forth between a couple of kids. And so by the time I'm done with this chart, and as they're discussing, I'm also gonna be writing out to the side some little anecdotal notes. Maybe a kid said something that was a misconception, and I'm gonna have to address that. Maybe somebody said something that really took the conversation to the next level, and I wanna talk about that. The person or the 2 or 3 students that might take something to the next level, I'm gonna give them a little plus, because then I'll give them some extra points at the end. 3 points, that's it. And I will always ask my students who deserves those points. Why do they deserve them? Inevitably, they're the exact same students that I would have picked, that they picked to get those extra points. I will also ask the students to analyze what their spider web looks like before I show it to them. And they can tell me if they're heavy on one side or on the other, and they learn where to sit and where not to sit. Oh, we can't sit next to each other because we're gonna turn and talk to each other, so we need to be away from each other. And I do it, and I would suggest by 4th and 5th grade, you can start this with them. Early elementary, not so much, but I do it as an all pass, all fail thing, where everybody participates, you all pass, 15 points. You don't all participate, you all fail, because it also is gonna help with communication and collaboration.
That's what I was gonna ask, what do you do for students that don't participate?
So the first time I run it is actually the first day of class, very first day of class. And they're like, whoa, you're grading us already. And you know that you're not gonna have everybody that fully participates. And so I tell them, it's okay. This was the first time 3 or 4 of you didn't participate, but the next time we do this, the expectation is that you all participate. You know that the second time around, there's still gonna be 1 or 2 that don't participate. And so I say in front of everyone, all right, by tomorrow, when you come back to class, I want at least 2 to 3 paragraphs of what you would have said in this discussion, and then everybody will receive their points. And then so you better do that, you better do that, right? By the time we do it for the 3rd time, everybody's participating. I've never had it end up that a group has failed. It may be that those students that are a little bit quieter, they only say 1 thing or 2 things, and I'm okay with that. But it's also teaching those kids that talk all the time to shut up and listen. You have to listen to what everybody else is saying, because this is a conversation. And it also teaches the kids how to very artfully draw people into the conversation. So if you're not one that talks, I can say, oh, you know what, Susie, I know that you and I were talking in class about this the other day, and you had some really great ideas. Would you share that with the group? Right? Instead of saying, all right, Susie, yet again, you have nothing to say. Come on. You know, they learn how to have a true discussion. And so it's a great way for me to do formative assessment to see if there are any misconceptions, or to tell me which kids maybe need some enrichment because they're already taking that conversation to the next level. And so it's a really great way for them to do that. Usually, if it's 2 weeks that go by without a discussion, the kids are asking, Mrs. Lauer, when's our next spider web? We haven't had one. And I've had discussions that have gone for 80 minutes. They've gone for an entire block period where the bell's ringing and the kids are like, but we weren't done discussing. At that middle school level, when I've gone in and I've modeled it in classrooms, it's very difficult for them to see somebody new that they don't know, first of all, coming in to do this. And so they start the discussion, well, I think this. Well, I think this. Well, I think this. And then I would have to stand behind them and I'd say, because. And they'd look at me and they'd roll their eyes and they'd say, because. And then after about 5 minutes, all of a sudden it just evolves into a true conversation. And then by the time I say, okay, Mrs. Lauer has to go, conversation's over, I have to go catch a plane, they're like, but we're not done discussing. So it takes them a little bit longer to kind of get into that mode of discussion. But I did write a blog post on it that really details how to run one of these. It's based off of the Harkness protocol, but I call it a spider web because I do a couple things a little bit differently. Another one that I like to do is a Socratic seminar, but again, I do it with my own twist. Again, in a circle, And what I do is I give them a prompt. And I'm not involved in the conversation except for this. Instead of charting it out, I'm going to be responsible for two things. One, every time I hear a question, I'm going to clap. Because the more questions that we ask, the more answers we uncover. And the second thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to be writing down their comments. So I'll just do it on big chart paper, and I'll abbreviate what their questions are. Because once we have all of these questions down, then we're going to do something called affinity mapping with them.
You're going too fast.
Okay, I'll slow down. Maybe that'll be my next blog post on my plane ride home tomorrow. So I'm going to clap every time they ask a question, because the goal in Socratic is to ask questions, right? But we can't just ask questions. I did this once with a group of administrators, and the superintendent, he started the conversation by asking 15 questions, and no one else could get a word in edgewise. And I said, no, you've defeated the whole purpose of this, right? Slow down, take a step back, and that helped me to do some formative assessment about his leadership style. But besides that, so I'm going to clap every time I hear a question, and I'm going to write that question down. And when we finish the discussion, we're going to do affinity mapping. So what I'm going to ask them in the affinity mapping is to look for 3 trends. And I'm just going to get up here and I'm going to color code them. I'm going to say, okay, what trends do you think we see? Well, we think we see a trend in this. Now let's find all of the questions that go with that particular trend. Now let's find all of the questions that go with the next trend. And so now we have 3 trends. And now I can start to craft lessons that go with those trends. Because I'm formatively assessing their understanding, and then I'm determining what kind of scaffolds that I need to put in place for it.
So this is your way, for me, I'm doing electricity right now.
Mm-hmm.
And my question was, how does the light bulb, how does the circuit make the electricity work? Or how does electricity work to light this light bulb? That was my question, and that's kind of basic, I know.
So that's more of your understanding question. So we want to, for one of these questions, we're going to want to bump it up a little bit more. So you would want to come up with a question that maybe would be somewhere along the lines of, why is it important to conserve electricity? And through that, maybe they're answering with some of your basic knowledge and understanding pieces, so you can assess that they do truly understand those.
Energy,
Okay. Mm-hmm.
to get that.
Right.
Yeah. Thanks.
So those are just a couple of different things that I incorporate.
In the past, at another school, we did, at the school I'm at, we do seminars quite frequently, but at another school we did seminars also. And I would use those, the mapping, the hardness mapping, to determine students' use. After reading a text, I would determine whether they were more making connections of text to text, text to self, text to whatever, text to real world.
Right.
However they were doing that, so that I could assess that for IEP goals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's just another way to do it. I might do a silent debate in class, and this helps with the kids that don't want to participate as much. And so maybe everybody starts with a piece of paper and they write their answer to whatever question that I give, and then they have to pass it to the next person, and the next person has to write a response. And then the following person has to read both responses and write a response. So it's silent, right? And now we all have to participate, and it keeps going that way. And so it's just another way for me to formatively assess each of their understandings of the content to see where they are and where I need to scaffold for them. Are they still down at the lower levels, or which kids are at the higher levels, and what can I do to support all of them? Because it's all about the process, because the more formative assessments that I do, the more I should be able to then come up with and predict what that end summative assessment is going to be. There shouldn't be any surprises. This is just another tool that is useful in helping you to kind of think about what's the end product, and the assessment, the summative assessment piece. So for that example in the previous slide, from the kindergarten students, they have these Rube Goldberg machines that they have to demonstrate and explain how they work. Okay, I've created this Rube Goldberg, this is how it works, this is why it works the way that it does. The content that I'm looking at, maybe I'm looking at force with push and pull, I'm looking at motion and gravity, I'm trying to teach collaboration skills. And in formatively assessing their understanding of force with push and pull, I might be having them create some draft sketches. They have to do a labeling check and some revised sketches. And so the P's and the T's and the S's, the P's stand for peer, the S's stand for self, the T stands for teacher. So before I look at the revised sketch, you need to have a peer that looks at the draft sketches, because I'm all about trying to take a lot of that responsibility off of me, because I don't want to have to just grade, but I want them to get some critique and feedback. So by the time they get to me, they should be leveled up and they should be better, right? Now, it looks pretty on a slide when it's broken down into these triads. It doesn't mean that you would just have a triad. You might have 5 or 6 things here. You might only have 2 for something. You might have 4 for something. It just depends on what it is that you're trying to specifically assess. Here's another example. This is a 9th grade math example. A good friend of mine in Oklahoma City, she had this particular project where her students had, one of the students had a parent that was in an accident who became wheelchair bound, and so her student's project was to redesign the home to make it accessible for the parent. And so the final product were the blueprints that they were doing, that they were submitting for review for an architectural firm that was going to then volunteer to do some implementation. So they're looking at scale and proportion, they're looking at cost analysis, we're throwing in the collaboration there. You don't need to worry about the numbers because obviously those are their particular categories of their standards. And these are the exact things that they were then doing, again, with self-peer and with teacher looking at it to ensure, with the assessment piece, that their blueprints were going to be where they wanted them to be at the end.
So you could do this with stations as well, once you get beyond the initial assessment, then you could maybe set up your teacher station, your peer-to-peer thing, and your
You could.
too.
Mm-hmm. You could. Yeah, I mean, this is just kind of is it a form, a blueprint, a template, and again, it could have as many lines as you would need to figure out where it goes. All right. So the formative assessment piece is really important. The scaffolding piece is really important. Your scaffolds can change depending on your formative assessments. Your scaffolds might change depending on your pre-assessment. Some of you talked about some pre-assessments that you were doing. So I might have in my head some of the things that I would think that I would need to scaffold for, and I do a pre-assessment and I go, oh, wait, there's something that I thought they would have that they didn't have that I need to incorporate. So this is where really the daily grind comes in of the teaching. So the project really is just reframing the approach to the teaching. It's not like our day-to-day stuff becomes anything brand new. It's just that the day-to-day stuff now feeds in specifically to the project itself. So we start with the project, we launch the project, we ask the students, what do we need to know about this? They come up with their questions, and now what do we need to do to facilitate that, to help to ensure success for all of our students? How do we scaffold for that? And as we're scaffolding, what are we doing as formative assessment checks to ensure that our students are here? And so with these formative assessments, these are things that we're doing in class on a daily basis, multiple times a day, but some of these actually then become actual formative products, things that they're turning in. So if I'm having them turn in those draft sketches, that's something tangible that I'm going to be able to utilize when I get to this summative piece, because when I ultimately grade a project, I need to be able to explain how I arrived at that end piece. And so these formative checkpoints are going to really help me to be able to justify whatever those grades are. All right. So that gives us about a half an hour left, roughly.
What?
25 minutes or so. What? It went fast? Good. Either we went really fast or we went really slowly, and we still have 25 minutes left. So as you were working earlier and thinking about projects, and you're thinking about your goals and your standards and connections and what your content is, you also then want to start to think about what are the summative products. If it helps you to create a chart like this, a map like this, feel free to do that. If you're more of an ideas person and you don't need a form, you don't have to do that. You know, what is that driving question? Is your driving question up at that creation level? That's where we want it to be, at that highest level. And then for each level of blooms, where are we with our questions that will help us to do the scaffolds for the activities through that? So I am here until 7 o'clock. If I'm going to leave you totally on your honor if you want to stay until 7 o'clock and work and get feedback from me. If you are, Dana, I am maxed out and I'm going to take this back and I'm going to look at it later. I'm okay with that too. I'm certainly not checking the list to say who stayed and who goes, but it's completely up to you. It is completely up to you. Of course, though, there is the end thing and the new, and I'll just,
What's the end
We
thing?
have one more class.
it's this one. We do have one more class in April. March? Oh, March? Yeah, March. Okay. Whenever it is. It's on my.
March 19th.
Okay. I'm glad you told me that. I'm sure it's on my calendar somewhere. But I'll throw this one up here too. Okay. So there's that one.